The morning sky above Zelthara Prime burned red with the smoke of 1,000 burning cities. Commander HFY stood on the cracked balcony of what had once been the Grand Council chamber, watching his world die piece by piece. The Krillian war machines moved through the streets below like metal death, their massive legs crushing everything in their path. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled under their weight. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the outer colonies," Lieutenant Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. The young officer's blue skin had turned pale with exhaustion. They hadn't slept in 3 days. HFY turned from the window, his 4 eyes focusing on the communication device in her trembling hands. The static-filled voice that emerged spoke of the same horror they were witnessing here. Colony after colony falling to the Krillian Empire, millions of Zeltharians dead or enslaved. Zelthara Prime to all remaining colonies. HFY spoke into the transmitter, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Continue evacuation procedures. Do not attempt to fight the war machines directly. Repeat, do not engage." But even as he said the words, he knew they were meaningless. There was nowhere to run. The Krillians had surrounded their entire system with their massive fleet. Ships the size of moons blocked out the stars, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet in half. The Krillian invasion had started 6 months ago. At first, the Zeltharian Defense Force thought they could hold their own. They had good ships, brave soldiers, and defensive positions throughout their 12-planet system. They had even managed to destroy several Krillian cruisers in the early battles. Then the real Krillian fleet arrived. The enemy ships were like nothing they had ever seen. Massive black vessels covered in weapons that fired beams of pure destruction. Their shields absorbed everything the Zeltharians threw at them. Worse still were the soldiers inside. The Krillians themselves were 8-foot-tall monsters with thick armor plating and claws that could tear through steel. They felt no pain, showed no mercy, and seemed to enjoy the suffering they caused. "Commander," Zara said, interrupting his dark thoughts, "we're receiving a priority message from Admiral Kestar on the orbital station." HFY took the communication device. Admiral Kestar's weathered face appeared on the small screen, his usually proud expression now filled with desperation. "HFY, we've lost contact with the 4th and 7th fleets," the Admiral reported. "The Krillians have broken through our outer defenses. They'll reach the planet's surface within the hour." "What about the call for help we sent to the Galactic Council?" HFY asked, though he already knew the answer from the Admiral's expression. "The Council is too afraid to act," Kestar replied bitterly. "The Krillians have already conquered 6 other systems in the past year. The Council says it's monitoring the situation, but won't send any military aid. We're on our own." HFY felt his heart sink. The Galactic Council represented over 200 species across the galaxy. If they wouldn't help, who would? "Sir, there might be one other option," Lieutenant Zara said hesitantly. Both HFY and the Admiral looked at her. "Speak," HFY ordered. "My cousin works in the Council's communication department. She told me about a message that was sent to a species on the Outer Rim, a newly discovered world called Earth. I think the message asked for military assistance." Admiral Kestar shook his head. "A newly discovered world? What could they possibly offer against the Krillians? If the advanced civilizations of the Council won't help us, what hope do we have from primitives?" "I don't know, sir," Zara admitted. "But the message was sent through the quantum relay network. If they received it, they know about our situation." HFY stared out the window again. In the distance, he could see Krillian dropships descending through the atmosphere like falling stars. Each one carried hundreds of enemy soldiers. Within hours, this city would be overrun just like all the others. "It doesn't matter now," he said quietly. "Even if this Earth wanted to help, they couldn't possibly arrive in time. And against the Krillian fleet." He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew how hopeless it was. The building shook as explosions erupted across the city. Krillian fighters screamed overhead, their weapons turning entire city blocks into rubble. HFY could hear the sound of Krillian war machines getting closer. The terrible metallic grinding of their legs against concrete. The high-pitched whine of their energy weapons charging. All remaining defense forces, fall back to positions Alpha through Delta, Vex High ordered into his communicator. Civilian evacuation is now priority 1. Get as many people to the underground shelters as possible. But he knew the shelters wouldn't protect them for long. The Krillians had powerful drilling machines that could burrow through solid rock. They would find the hiding civilians eventually. Admiral Kestar's image flickered on the screen as explosions rocked the orbital station. Vex High, the station is under direct attack. We can't hold them much longer. The main reactor is overloading. Admiral, get your people to the escape pods, Vex High urged. Negative. We're going to ram the command ship. Maybe we can take some of them with us. Kestar's face was grim but determined. It's been an honor serving with you. A-Team Sard. My Galady 1. It's been an honor serving with you. A-Team Sardi 1. A-Team Sardi 1. My Galady 1. Commander. The transmission cut to static. Minutes later, a brilliant flash lit up the sky as the orbital station collided with the massive Krillian command vessel. The explosion was visible even through the thick smoke covering the city. Vex High closed his eyes for a moment, honoring his old friend's sacrifice. When he opened them, Lieutenant Zara was staring at something on her scanner, with a confused expression. Sir, I'm reading some kind of energy disturbance in high orbit. Multiple contacts appearing on sensors. Krillian reinforcements? Vex High asked wearily. I don't think so, sir. The energy signatures are completely different. And they're not using Krillian ship designs. Zara's voice carried a note of excitement, despite their desperate situation. Vex High moved to look over her shoulder at the scanner readings. What he saw made no sense. Dozens of unknown contacts had just appeared in their system, apparently emerging from some kind of faster-than-light travel. But the ships were tiny compared to Krillian vessels. Some were barely larger than fighters. Could they be refugees from another system? He wondered aloud. Sir, I'm receiving a transmission. It's on the same frequency we used to send the distress call to Earth. Vex High's hearts began beating faster. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the communicator spoke in accented galactic standard. But the words were clear and strong. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We received your call for help. Sorry we're late to the party, but we had to make a few stops on the way here. Zeltharian forces, please identify your positions, so we can avoid friendly fire. We're about to show these Krillian bastards what happens when they mess with innocent people. Vex High stared at the communicator in disbelief. They had come. This unknown species from a distant world had actually answered their call for help. Earth vessels, this is Commander Vex High of Zelthara Prime. Be advised. You are vastly outnumbered. The Krillian fleet consists of over 300 capital ships, each one heavily armed and shielded. Your ships appear to be much smaller. A different voice responded, this one filled with grim amusement. Commander, this is Captain Jake Morrison. Don't worry about our ship size. We brought enough firepower to level a continent. Besides, humans have a saying, it's not the size of the ship in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the ship. Lieutenant Zara was frantically working at her scanner station. Sir, the Earth ships are breaking into attack formation. They're moving directly toward the Krillian fleet. Vex High watched the display in amazement. The tiny Earth vessels were approaching the massive Krillian armada without any apparent fear. It was either the bravest thing he had ever seen, or the most foolish. All Zeltharian forces, this is Admiral Chen. We're going to create an opening in their fleet. When we give you the signal, get your people to safety. We'll handle the rest. Admiral, you don't understand, Vex High protested. The Krillian ships have shields that can absorb any energy weapon we've ever used against them. Their armor is nearly indestructible. Thanks for the warning, Commander, Admiral Chen replied calmly. But we didn't come all this way to turn around now. Earth Force, this is Admiral Chen. You are weapons-free. Show them what human ingenuity can do. What happened next changed everything Vex High thought he knew about warfare. The Earth ships opened fire with weapons unlike anything in the galactic database. Instead of energy beams or plasma charges, they launched solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The Krillian shields, designed to absorb energy, did nothing to stop chunks of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. The first Krillian cruiser to be hit simply disappeared. Where there had been a massive warship, there was now only expanding debris and confused energy readings. Impossible, Vex-High whispered. Railguns, Captain Morrison's voice explained cheerfully. Turns out all those fancy energy shields don't mean much when you just throw rocks at them really, really fast. The Krillian fleet was in chaos. Their commanders had never faced kinetic weapons before. Ships that had seemed invincible moments ago were being torn apart by what appeared to be primitive projectile weapons. But the Earth forces weren't finished. As the Krillian fleet tried to regroup, smaller Earth vessels darted between the massive enemy ships like insects around giants. They attached strange devices to the Krillian hulls and then retreated quickly. "What are they doing?" Lieutenant Zara asked. Their question was answered when the devices exploded simultaneously. But these weren't normal explosions. They seemed to tear holes in space itself, creating tiny black vortexes that sucked in everything around them. Micro-singularity charges, Admiral Chen explained casually. "We figured if your enemies have really big ships, you need weapons that can make really big holes." Within minutes, the mighty Krillian fleet was in full retreat. Ships that had terrorized entire systems were running from opponents a tenth their size. But the space battle was only the beginning. Down on the planet's surface, Krillian ground forces were still advancing through the cities. Their massive war machines continued crushing everything in their path. "Don't worry about the ground forces," Captain Morrison said. "We've got that covered too. Marines are already on their way down." Vex-High looked up at the sky, wondering what other surprises these humans had in store. In the distance, he could see small objects falling through the atmosphere. They were too small to be ships, but too large to be weapons. As they got closer, he realized they were soldiers in some kind of armor. Individual human warriors were dropping directly into combat zones, apparently with nothing but their personal equipment. "They're going to be slaughtered," Lieutenant Zara said in horror. "Krillian soldiers are 8 feet tall and armored. These humans look so small." Vex-High was about to agree when the first human soldier landed in the street outside their building. The impact crater suggested tremendous force, but the figure that stood up from it appeared completely unharmed. The human was indeed smaller than a Krillian warrior, but the powered armor they wore gleamed with advanced technology. Energy readings from the suit suggested power levels that rivaled a small starship. 3 Krillian soldiers emerged from a damaged building, their claws extended and ready to kill. They charged the lone human with roars that could shatter glass. What happened next lasted less than 3 seconds. The human moved faster than Vex-High's eyes could follow. Some kind of weapon appeared in their hands. Not an energy rifle, but a projectile weapon similar to the ship-based railguns. The sound when it fired was like thunder. When the smoke cleared, the 3 Krillian soldiers were simply gone. Not dead. Gone. Completely vaporized. "Sweet mother of stars," Vex-High whispered. More human soldiers were landing throughout the city. Everywhere they appeared, Krillian forces began retreating in panic. The terrifying warriors that had conquered half the galaxy were running away from these small beings from Earth. Lieutenant Zara was monitoring communication channels. "Sir, I'm picking up Krillian transmissions. They're calling for immediate evacuation." They're actually afraid. Vex-High couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Krillians? Afraid? It seemed impossible. "Commander Vex-High," Admiral Chen's voice came through the communicator. "We'll have your planet secured within the next few hours. Our ground forces are already pushing the Krillians back to their landing zones. But we need to talk about something important." "What is it, Admiral?" "This was just one Krillian fleet. According to our intelligence, they have dozens more spread across the galaxy. If we're going to end this threat permanently, we're going to need help from every free species in the galaxy." Vex-High looked out at his burning city. where human soldiers were now helping Zeltharian civilians emerge from the rubble. These strange beings from Earth had arrived when no one else would. They had faced impossible odds without hesitation, and somehow, they were winning. "What do you need from us?" he asked. "We need allies," Admiral Chen replied. "And we need you to send a message to every species the Krillians have attacked. Tell them Earth is gathering a coalition. Tell them the galaxy doesn't have to live in fear anymore. The Krillians wanted to rule everyone through terror and violence. But humans have a different idea about how things should work." Vexhai smiled for the first time in months. "And what idea is that, Admiral?" "That free people should never bow to tyrants. No matter how big they are, no matter how scary they seem, there's always someone willing to stand up and fight back. Today, that someone is us." As he watched human soldiers helping his people, Vexhai realized that everything was about to change. The galaxy had spent too long being afraid of the Krillians and species like them, but Earth had just proven that even the most terrifying enemies could be defeated. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, Vexhai had hope. These humans were unlike any species he had ever encountered. They were smaller than many galactic species, had less advanced technology than some, and came from a world nobody had heard of. But they had something that all their enemies lacked: the absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. The Krillians had thought no one would come to save Zelthara Prime. They had been very, very wrong. 3 weeks after the liberation of Zelthara Prime, Commander Vexhai found himself standing in a war room aboard the human flagship Indomitable. The ship's design was unlike anything he had seen before. Functional, efficient, and somehow intimidating despite being smaller than most Council vessels. "The Krillians have pulled back to the Vorthak system," Admiral Chen was explaining to the assembled representatives from 12 different species. "Intelligence suggests they're regrouping for a major counterattack." Vexhai looked around the room at the other alien commanders. There was General Mordeth from the Thrakari warrior clans, Admiral Yesha from the aquatic Nereid worlds, Captain Zilk from the insectoid hive collective, and others. All of them had suffered under Krillian aggression. All of them had answered Earth's call for an alliance. "How many ships are we talking about?" asked General Mordeth, his massive frame bristling with barely controlled aggression. The Thrakari were known for their love of battle, but even they had been overwhelmed by Krillian forces. Admiral Chen touched a control, and a holographic display showed the Vorthak system. Red dots filled the screen. "Hundreds of them. Our reconnaissance indicates over 800 capital ships, plus support vessels. The largest Krillian fleet ever assembled." The room fell silent. Even combined, the coalition forces numbered less than 300 ships. Admiral Yesha said, her voice carrying the melodic tones of her aquatic species. "With respect to human courage, those numbers suggest this will be a massacre. Perhaps we should consider a defensive strategy instead." Captain Morrison, who was sitting next to Admiral Chen, laughed. "Ma'am, with respect, humans don't really do defensive strategies. We're more of an attack the problem until it stops being a problem kind of species. But how can we possibly win against such overwhelming numbers?" Captain Zilk asked, his insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. Dr. Emma Walsh, Earth's chief science officer, stood up from where she had been working quietly at a computer terminal. "Because, Captain, we're not going to fight them the way they expect us to." She activated another holographic display, this one showing detailed scans of Krillian ships. "For the past 3 weeks, we've been studying every piece of Krillian technology we could get our hands on. We've found some very interesting weaknesses." Vexhai leaned forward, interested. "What kind of weaknesses?" "Their ships are designed around the assumption that bigger is always better," Dr. Walsh explained. "Massive reactors, heavy armor, powerful shields. But all that size makes them slow and predictable. More importantly, they have a fundamental design flaw." The hologram zoomed in on the reactor core of a Krillian cruiser. "Their power systems are incredibly centralized. One main reactor feeds everything: weapons, shields, life support, engines. If you can disable that reactor, the entire ship becomes a floating coffin. But their reactors are heavily shielded," General Mordeth pointed out. My people tried to target them for months with no success. That's because you were trying to destroy them from the outside, Captain Morrison said with a grin. We're going to destroy them from the inside. Dr. Walsh nodded and activated another display. This one showed what looked like a small metallic sphere, barely the size of a human fist. Meet the Trojan Horse Mark 7, a self-guided nanopenetrator designed to burrow through any material and deliver a targeted EMP burst directly to enemy reactor cores. How do you get them inside the ships? Admiral Yesha asked. That's the beautiful part, Captain Morrison replied. We don't have to. These little beauties are fired from our railguns at the same time as regular kinetic rounds. The Krillians think they're just debris from the impact, but each one seeks out the nearest power source and starts digging. Vex High was amazed. How long does it take them to reach the reactor? About 30 seconds. Dr. Walsh said casually. Long enough for the Krillians to think they survived the initial attack. Not long enough for them to realize what's really happening. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. That's just Phase 1. Phase 2 is where things get interesting. We're going to use their size advantage against them. The holographic display changed again, now showing a tactical overview of the Vorthak system. The Krillians always fight in tight formations. Their massive ships provide cover and overlapping fields of fire. It's been effective against every enemy they've faced. Because every enemy they've faced fights like they do, Captain Morrison added. Big ships, slugging it out at long range. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. We're not going to fight at long range. We're going inside their formation. The alien commanders looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. Inside? Admiral Yesha asked. That would be suicide. Would it? Dr. Walsh asked. Let me show you something. Computer, run tactical simulation, Alpha 7. The hologram changed to show a recreation of the battle at Zelthera Prime. They watched as tiny human ships darted between massive Krillian vessels. Too small and fast for the enemy's heavy weapons to track. Krillian weapon systems are designed to engage large targets at long distances, Dr. Walsh explained. Their targeting computers literally cannot lock onto anything smaller than a certain size threshold. It's a design feature meant to prevent them from wasting ammunition on fighters and debris. But that means once we're inside their formation, their big guns can't hit us, Vex High realized. Exactly, Admiral Chen confirmed. And while they're trying to figure out how to hit targets that are too small for their sensors, we'll be planting our little presence on every reactor core in the fleet. General Mordeth leaned back in his chair, a fierce grin spreading across his battle-scarred face. It is audacious. Completely insane, but audacious. My people approve. There's one more thing, Captain Morrison said. We're not just going to disable their ships. We're going to capture them. This caused another stir among the alien commanders. Capture Krillian vessels? Captain Zilk asked. For what purpose? Because, Admiral Chen explained, we're not just fighting a war. We're sending a message to every species in the galaxy. The message is that the age of empires built on fear and conquest is over. Dr. Walsh pulled up another display. This one, showing technical specifications. We've developed boarding pods, specifically designed to cut through Krillian armor. Once their ships are disabled, human marines will board them and secure the vessels. But Krillian soldiers are incredibly dangerous in close combat, Admiral Yesha protested. They're larger, stronger, and better armed than most galactic species. Most galactic species, yes, Captain Morrison agreed. But not humans. See, most species evolve on worlds where they're the dominant predator. Humans are different. We evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to be creative. He gestured to a display showing human marine equipment. Our boarding teams don't try to match Krillian soldiers strength for strength. Instead, we use superior tactics, better technology, and what we call aggressive problem-solving. Vex High had seen human marines in action during the liberation of his world. They moved like ghosts through enemy positions, appearing where they weren't expected, striking where the enemy was weakest, and disappearing before retaliation could arrive. There's something else you should know about humans, Doctor, Walsh added quietly. We don't just fight to win battles. We fight to win wars. And winning this war means making sure the Krillians can never threaten anyone again. You mean genocide? General Mordeth asked bluntly. No, Admiral Chen replied firmly. We mean rehabilitation. Every Krillian ship we capture, every soldier we take prisoner, every piece of their technology we study, it all serves the same purpose. We're going to dismantle their ability to make war, and then we're going to help them find a better way to exist in the galaxy. This concept seemed to puzzle the alien commanders. Most galactic warfare was about territory, resources, or dominance. The idea of fighting to change an enemy's entire civilization was foreign to them. Humans believe that every species has the potential for good, Dr. Walsh explained. Even the Krillians. They've spent centuries as conquerors, because that's all they know. We're going to show them there's a different path. And if they refuse to take that path? Admiral Yesha asked. Captain Morrison's expression became deadly serious. Then we'll make sure they never threaten innocent people again. Humans can be very thorough when we need to be. Over the next few days, Vex High watched the human military machine in action. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Where other species had rigid command structures and detailed battle plans, humans seemed to thrive on improvisation and adaptation. He observed a training exercise where human pilots were practicing their attack runs. The simulation showed them diving into a Krillian formation, weaving between massive ships while deploying nano-penetrators with pinpoint accuracy. What amazed him wasn't just their skill, but their attitude. They were actually enjoying themselves. Commander Vex High, a voice said behind him. He turned to find Dr. Walsh approaching, carrying a data pad. Could I ask you something? Of course, Doctor. What did your people think of humans when we first arrived? Vex High considered the question carefully. Honestly, we thought you were insane. Your ships were too small, your tactics were too aggressive, and you seemed to have no fear of the Krillians whatsoever. Dr. Walsh smiled. And now? Now I understand that what we mistook for insanity was actually confidence. You knew you could win because you had already figured out how to win. You had studied the problem, developed solutions, and prepared for every contingency. He paused. But there's something else. You came anyway. What do you mean? Even if you hadn't been sure you could win, you would have come anyway. Because we asked for help, and humans don't abandon people who need help. That's not tactics or technology. That's just who you are. Dr. Walsh nodded thoughtfully. You know, Commander, that might be our greatest weapon. Not the railguns or the nano-penetrators or the boarding pods. Just the fact that we refuse to let bullies win. Is that why you think you can change the Krillians? In part, she replied. But also because we understand something about bullies. They're usually bullies because they're afraid. The Krillians have been conquering other species for so long, they've forgotten how to do anything else. We're going to remind them. The next morning, Admiral Chen gathered all the coalition forces for the final briefing before the assault on the Vorthax system. The hangar bay of the Indomitable was filled with beings from dozens of different worlds, all united by a common cause. In 6 hours, we're going to attack the largest enemy fleet in galactic history, Admiral Chen announced. The odds against us are roughly 3-1. By any conventional analysis, we should lose. She paused, looking around at the assembled faces. But we're not going to lose. Do you know why? Because we're not fighting for conquest or territory or resources. We're fighting for something much more important. We're fighting for the idea that intelligent beings should be free to choose their own destiny. 1-4, 1-4-4, 1-4. General Mordeth stood up. Admiral, my people have a saying. The strongest weapon is not the sharpest sword, but the will to use it. Today, we fight alongside humans who have shown us what that will truly means. Admiral Yesha rose next. My people have swum in dark waters for generations, afraid to surface. Today, we swim toward the light. One by one, each species representative stood and pledged their forces to the coming battle. But it was Captain Morrison who had the final word. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings," he said with typical human informality. "In about 6 hours, we're going to show the galaxy something it's never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when free people stand together against tyranny. The Krillians think might makes right. Today, we're going to prove them wrong." As the coalition forces prepared for battle, Vex High found himself thinking about the message this would send across the galaxy. For too long, species had stood by while others suffered under Krillian oppression. Everyone assumed that resistance was futile, that the Krillians were too powerful to defeat, but humans had changed that calculation. They had shown that even the most overwhelming force could be overcome with the right tactics, the right technology, and most importantly, the right motivation. The war was about to enter its final phase, and for the first time in galactic history, the Krillians were about to learn what it meant to face an enemy that refused to surrender. The Vorthax system blazed with the light of 800 Krillian warships as the coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace. Commander Vex High stood on the bridge of his rebuilt cruiser, Starfire's Hope, watching the massive enemy armada through the viewing screen. Despite everything the humans had told him, the sight still sent ice through his veins. "Coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen." The human commander's voice came through the communication system, steady and confident. "Remember, speed is life today. Stay fast, stay unpredictable, and trust your human partners. Operation Liberation begins now." What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Miracle of Vorthak, though humans typically just called it Tuesday. The coalition fleet split into 12 attack groups, each centered around a cluster of human ships. Instead of the traditional battle line formation that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia, the humans led their allies in what appeared to be a chaotic swarm approach. "All ships, execute Pattern Delta," Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the communications. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them all at once. We're going to cut them apart piece by piece." Vex High watched in amazement as the tiny human vessels accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible for ships their size. They dove straight into the center of the Krillian formation, weaving between the massive enemy vessels like schools of fish avoiding predators. The Krillian response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of energy beams lanced out from the enemy fleet, turning space itself into a deadly light show. But the beams passed harmlessly through empty space, where the human ships had been milliseconds before. "How are they moving like that?" his sensor officer asked in disbelief. "Predictive algorithms," Dr. Walsh's voice answered from the communication channel. She was aboard the human ship, Prometheus, coordinating the technical aspects of the battle. "Our computers analyze enemy firing patterns and calculate safe movement paths in real time. We're always one step ahead of their targeting systems." The first phase of the human attack became visible as dozens of Krillian ships suddenly went dark. The nanopenetrators had reached their targets, and entire sections of the enemy fleet found themselves without power, weapons, or shields. But this was just the beginning. "Phase 2. Initiate," Admiral Chen ordered. Vex High watched human boarding pods launch from their ships, each one no larger than a shuttle but moving with the precision of a guided missile. They attached themselves to the hulls of disabled Krillian vessels and began cutting through the armor with some kind of plasma torch. "Human Marines are now boarding enemy vessels," Captain Morrison reported with obvious satisfaction. "Remember, we want prisoners, not casualties. Set weapons to stun and use non-lethal force whenever possible." The idea of showing mercy to Krillian soldiers seemed insane to most galactic species. But Vex High had learned not to question human tactics. Everything they did had a purpose. Even when it seemed contradictory, Admiral Yesha's voice came through the communication network. "Human vessels, this is Admiral Yesha. My ships are ready to provide covering fire for your boarding operations." "Appreciated, Admiral," Admiral Chen replied. "But save your ammunition. We're about to give the Krillians something else to worry about." On cue, the second wave of human ships appeared from hyperspace. But these weren't warships, they were massive cargo vessels, each one the size of a small moon. "What are those?" General Mordeth asked from his command ship. Dr. Walsh's voice carried a note of excitement. Those, General, are construction ships. We're about to demonstrate another uniquely human approach to warfare: logistics. The cargo ships moved to positions throughout the battlefield and began deploying something that looked like space-based factories. Within minutes, they were producing new ships, weapons, and equipment directly on the battlefield. Impossible, Vex High whispered. You can't manufacture starships in the middle of a battle. Sure you can, Captain Morrison replied cheerfully. You just need the right automation and enough raw materials. Fortunately, disabled Krillian ships make excellent raw materials. Vex High watched in disbelief as human construction drones swarmed over the captured enemy vessels, stripping them down and feeding the materials into the space-based factories. Within an hour, the humans were producing new fighters faster than the Krillians could destroy them. The Krillian fleet, which had started the battle with overwhelming numerical superiority, was now facing an enemy that was literally growing stronger with every ship they lost. This is Krillian command to all vessels, a harsh voice broke through on the general communication frequency. Retreat to secondary positions. Repeat. All vessels retreat immediately. But the humans weren't finished. Admiral Chen, to all coalition forces. The human commander's voice cut across the battlefield. Phase 3 is now in effect. It's time to end this. What the humans called Phase 3 was perhaps the most audacious tactical maneuver in galactic history. Instead of pursuing the retreating Krillian fleet, they surrounded them with a barrier of their own ships and began broadcasting on all frequencies. Attention Krillian forces, Admiral Chen's voice rang out across space. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned, but we're not here to destroy you. We're here to offer you a choice. The response from the Krillian fleet was predictable. Human scum, we will never surrender to inferior species. We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy. That's what we thought you'd say, Captain Morrison's voice replied. Dr. Walsh, initiate Project Enlightenment. Dr. Walsh's voice came through clearly. Project Enlightenment is now active. All Krillian vessels, prepare to receive data transmission. What happened next was something no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Instead of continuing the attack, human ships began broadcasting massive amounts of information directly into the Krillian fleet's communication systems. What are you sending them? Vex High asked. Everything, Dr. Walsh replied simply. Our history, our philosophy, our science, our art, our music. Everything that makes humans who we are. But more importantly, we're showing them the histories of every species they've conquered, every world they've destroyed, every civilization they've ended. The effect on the Krillian fleet was immediate and dramatic. Ship after ship went silent as their crews absorbed the transmitted information. For the first time in their species' history, the Krillians were seeing themselves as others saw them. You're trying to change their entire worldview in the middle of a battle, General Mordeth observed with what might have been admiration. That's exactly what we're doing, Admiral Chen confirmed. Krillians aren't evil by nature. They're just a species that's been trapped in a cycle of violence for so long they forgot there were other options. We're showing them what those options look like. For 3 hours, the battlefield was silent except for the constant stream of data flowing from human ships to Krillian vessels. When the transmission finally stopped, the response was not what anyone expected. Human fleet, this is War Leader Thoctol of the Krillian Armada, a new voice spoke. Different from the harsh commander who had refused surrender earlier. We request permission to come aboard your vessel. There are things we must discuss. Admiral Chen's response was immediate. Permission granted, War Leader. Dock with the Indomitable. But you come as guests, not prisoners. What followed was the most unprecedented diplomatic meeting in galactic history. War Leader Thoctol, accompanied by his senior officers, boarded the human flagship for direct negotiations. Vex High was invited to observe the meeting, along with representatives from the other coalition species. What he saw there challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of war and peace. War Leader Thoctol was typical of his species, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, and possessing claws that could tear through steel. But as he stood in the conference room aboard the Indomitable, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished by what he had learned. "We have spent 3 centuries conquering worlds," the Krillian leader said in his gravelly voice. "We believed it was our destiny, our right as the strongest species. But your transmission, it has shown us the cost of our actions." Admiral Chen nodded respectfully. "War leader, every species has the capacity for both good and evil, humans included. We've made our share of mistakes throughout our history. The difference is that we learned from them. But how can we undo centuries of conquest and death?" Thoctol asked. "How can we repair what we have broken? The same way you broke it," Dr. Walsh answered gently. "One world at a time. One species at a time. One individual at a time. But this time, you build instead of destroy." Captain Morrison leaned forward. "War leader, humans believe that redemption is possible for anyone willing to work for it. Your people have skills, technology, and resources that could be used to help instead of harm. The question is whether you're willing to try." The negotiations continued for 12 hours. In the end, an agreement was reached that would reshape the galaxy. The Krillian Empire would be dissolved. Their conquered territories would be returned to their original inhabitants or granted independence. Krillian military technology would be shared with coalition forces to help defend against other potential threats. In return, the Krillian people would be integrated into the new galactic coalition as equals, not conquerors. They would use their industrial capabilities to help rebuild the worlds they had destroyed. Their warriors would become protectors instead of oppressors. "There is one condition," Admiral Chen said firmly. "Any Krillian who cannot accept this new path will be relocated to uninhabited worlds where they can live as they choose without threatening others. But they will never again be permitted to wage war against innocent species." War leader Thoctol considered this for a long moment. Then he removed his war leader insignia and placed them on the table. "I accept these terms. I speak for my people when I say we are tired of being the galaxy's nightmare. Perhaps it is time we learned to be something better." The aftermath of the Battle of Vorthak rippled across the galaxy for years. Species that had lived in fear of Krillian expansion suddenly found themselves free. Worlds that had been conquered were liberated. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Empire were open to all. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that even the most seemingly hopeless conflicts could be resolved through a combination of military strength, tactical brilliance, and sheer determination to find a better way. Vex High stood on the observation deck of his ship 6 months later, watching as former Krillian warriors worked alongside Zeltharian engineers to rebuild the cities that had been destroyed in the invasion. The sight would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. "Commander," Lieutenant Zara said as she approached with a datapad, "we've received another request for assistance. A species in the Outer Rim is being threatened by something called the Shadow Syndicate." Vex High smiled as he took the communication device. "Put me through to Admiral Chen." Moments later, the human admiral's face appeared on the screen. "Commander Vex High. Good to see you. I heard about the situation in the Outer Rim. How many ships can you spare?" "All of them," Vex High replied without hesitation. "When do we leave?" Admiral Chen grinned. "As soon as we can get there. Looks like the galaxy still needs some protecting." As his ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, Vex High thought about how much things had changed. A year ago, species throughout the galaxy had lived in isolation, afraid to help each other for fear of drawing the attention of larger predators. Now they had learned something that humans had tried to teach them from the beginning, that the strongest force in the universe wasn't the biggest gun or the most advanced technology or the largest fleet. It was the simple refusal to let evil triumph over good. The humans had shown them that no enemy was too large, no odds too overwhelming, no cause too hopeless if you were willing to stand up and fight for what was right. They had thought no one would come to save them when the Krillians invaded. They had been wrong. And now, whenever someone else in the galaxy sent out a call for help, they would be wrong too. Because the coalition that had started with one small human fleet had grown into something much larger. A galaxy-wide commitment to the idea that free people should protect each other. The age of empires built on fear was over. The Age of Heroes had begun, and it had all started when Earth's warriors descended from the sky, answering a call for help that everyone else had ignored. The humans had kept their promise. They had shown the galaxy what happened when people refused to give up hope. Sometimes, the good guys really did win.